Another day, another story. The Cuban Missile Crisis, a tumultuous chapter in Cold War history. The Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962 stands as one of the most perilous moments in the history of the Cold War. The world watched in fear as the United States and the Soviet Union, both armed with nuclear weapons, confronted each other over the placement of Soviet missiles in Cuba, a mere 90 miles from the American mainland. This essay delves into the events leading up to the crisis, its unfolding, and its resolution, while also examining the lasting impact it had on international relations. Prelude to crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis can be traced back to the broader context of Cold War tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. After the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Fidel Castro's Cuba became a focal point of Cold War conflict. The United States viewed Cuba as a potential threat due to its alignment with the Soviet Union and its adoption of communism. In response, the U.S. government imposed an economic embargo on Cuba and launched covert operations to undermine Castro's regime. The first crucial event leading to the crisis was the Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961. This failed attempt, covertly supported by the United States, involved Cuban exiles trying to overthrow Castro's government. The humiliation of the U.S. failure further solidified Castro's commitment to seeking protection from the Soviet Union. Simultaneously, the U.S. had been deploying nuclear-armed Jupiter missiles in Turkey and Italy, provoking Soviet concerns about their strategic vulnerability. The arms race and military buildup between the superpowers intensified. Discovery of missile sites. In early October 1962, U.S. reconnaissance planes discovered evidence of Soviet nuclear missile sites being constructed in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy was briefed on the situation, and the evidence was undeniable. This discovery brought the world to the brink of a nuclear confrontation. Kennedy's first course of action was to address the American people on October 22, 1962, informing them of the grave situation and imposing a naval quarantine, or quarantine line, around Cuba to prevent further Soviet shipments of military equipment. He also demanded the immediate removal of the missiles. The confrontation. The following days saw a tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both sides engaged in intense diplomatic negotiations through various channels, including the United Nations. Meanwhile, the U.S. military was on high alert, and preparations for a potential invasion of Cuba were made. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, in his initial response, did not directly address the missile sites in Cuba, but criticized the U.S. for its deployment of missiles in Turkey and Italy. The world held its breath as the superpowers engaged in a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. As the crisis deepened, there was a sense of impending catastrophe. At any moment, it seemed, the world could descend into a nuclear war of unimaginable destruction. The 13 days between October 16th and October 28th were arguably the most perilous moments in the history of the Cold War. Diplomacy prevails. Amid the tension and uncertainty, diplomacy played a crucial role in diffusing the crisis. Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother and attorney general, secretly met with Soviet ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin. They discussed a potential deal where the U.S. would publicly commit to removing its missiles from Turkey and Italy in exchange for the Soviets dismantling their missiles in Cuba. This secret back channel allowed both superpowers to find a face-saving solution. Simultaneously, President Kennedy received 2 letters from Khrushchev. The first was conciliatory and proposed a trade of U.S. missile removal from Turkey for Soviet missile removal from Cuba. In the second letter, Khrushchev, under pressure from his military and hardliners, toughened his stance by adding the condition that the U.S. must promise not to invade Cuba. The crisis seemed to teeter on the brink of escalation again. Kennedy chose to respond to the first letter, agreeing to the trade of U.S. missiles in Turkey and Italy for the removal of Soviet missiles from Cuba. The following day, Khrushchev accepted this offer and announced the dismantling of the missile sites in Cuba. On October 28th, Khrushchev broadcasted to the world that the Soviet Union would remove its missiles from Cuba, and Kennedy confirmed the U.S. commitment to remove its missiles from Turkey. The Cuban Missile Crisis had been averted. Aftermath and legacy. The resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis brought a sigh of relief to a world that had been on the precipice of nuclear war. It demonstrated the importance of diplomacy and crisis management in preventing the unthinkable. The crisis had several significant consequences and lasting impacts. The hotline. In the aftermath of the crisis, both superpowers recognized the need for improved communication to avoid misperceptions and miscommunication in times of crisis. The Moscow-Washington Hotline, a direct communication link between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, was established in 1963. Test ban treaty, the crisis also spurred a desire for arms control and détente. In 1963, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom signed the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which banned nuclear weapons testing in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater. Détente. The Cuban Missile Crisis planted the seeds for a period of détente during the late 1960s and early 1970s, marked by improved U.S.-Soviet relations and a reduction in Cold War tensions. Cuban-Soviet relations. Despite averting nuclear war, Fidel Castro felt betrayed by Khrushchev's decision to remove the missiles without consulting him. This led to strained relations between Cuba and the Soviet Union. Lessons learned. The Cuban Missile Crisis served as a cautionary tale for both superpowers. The idea that mutual destruction was a possible outcome of the Cold War influenced future U.S.-Soviet relations and their approach to conflicts. In conclusion, the Cuban Missile Crisis was a pivotal moment in the history of the Cold War, bringing the world closer to nuclear Armageddon than ever before. It was a testament to the dangers of superpower rivalries and the importance of diplomacy in averting catastrophic conflicts. The crisis shaped subsequent arms control agreements, improved communication channels, and underscored the need for peaceful coexistence in an age of nuclear weapons. Thanks for watching. For more, please like and subscribe.